Okay. All right. Cool. So I guess let's start off the today's stay-at-home mocap. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Mhm.
I'm here. I'm in Miami, Florida here, and I have my special guest here, Patrick from North Carolina. And just a quick introduction. Thank you for joining us, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's nice to work with you guys remotely after I've moved. So,
Yeah, it's great to reconnect.
yep.
We've worked directly, and also we've worked collaboratively with just with hardware testing and stuff with Patrick. So it's great to have him on board.
Mhm.
So yeah, just to introduce everyone, today's we're going to briefly talk about the Neuron Livelink plugin for Perception Neuron on Unreal. Just a quick note, today's video is going to be recorded, so if you do miss it, we'll have it uploaded on our YouTube channel after the video. So don't feel free, don't feel like you missed something. We'll put it up in the post. So our team members at Noidum here is, you can see our contact information at the bottom. If you have any questions, feel free to email us after for any questions. And as I mentioned, this is we have our special guest Patrick on board. Patrick, I got that picture from
I
your
was like,
Facebook.
I'm glad you grabbed my Facebook profile. That's awesome.
All right. So yeah,
No worries.
Patrick is yeah, like you see his picture. He's a rock star with Unreal and stuff, and he does a lot of live. He's worked. He has a huge, you know, work previous. He's worked with a lot of projects, and we met him through Notch, and also now with Unreal. So it's good to have him here with us with his knowledge of Unreal. So thank you again, Patrick.
Yeah, no worries.
So today's just quick webinar is just perception on data going real time into Unreal Live Link plugin, and you can find the plugin on our downloads page neuronmocap.com/software unreal dash plugin. So make sure you guys download that for this video. We'll have some documentation online as well through our support center, so you guys can walk along as well if you're a documentation person there. So what is LiveLink? And this is just a little excerpt that I got from Unreal documentation. And the purpose of LiveLink is to provide a common interface for streaming and consuming animation data from external sources into Unreal Engine 4. It is designed to be extensible through Unreal plugins, allowing third parties to develop new features, hopefully with no need to make then maintain engine changes. In other words, it's I like to call it like it's a mocap hub. It's just the hub where it's able to receive external data, and the base. For this video, we're going to be showcasing how we, as Perception from Noidum, how we use that integration inside of Unreal, so that users, production artists, can use our data in real time, which becomes a very important asset in your tool set. So this is a quick workflow. Right now, we're going to be testing with our Axis Studio. It does work with Axis Neuron Pro, so it'll be acting as a neuron host data, and that data goes into Unreal Engine through the live link, and it sets up like a client. So you have a host and you have a client that's going through. So this is quite, it's already built in. It's just a matter of doing a few setups with your characters inside of Unreal, making it a lot easier for a lot of artists out there. So what is the best use for this plugin and this integration for virtual production and for live events? You can go a separate webinar and go for hours and discussing what is virtual production, what is live events, but it's a fast changing production industry out there that's going on. So it's a lot of demand, a lot of fast changing and high demand. So it requires to work with directors, with production artists on the fly, making changes, and by utilizing the live link, we're able to make fast changes and quick updates. So we're taking that to the best advantage. In this demo, we're actually going to be using last week or this week actually we released our Perception Neuron remote support, and this is more or less this is available through our github.com/neuromocap, page. So if you're interested in setting up your own mocap server for remote use, feel free to use that. That's available for everyone out there. And essentially all I'm doing is I'm setting up my data remotely here in Miami, and Patrick, who is in North Carolina, is going to be receiving my data through the cloud so that we can remotely work and collaboratively work. So this is great because he can test out the Livelink plugin, and he can just receive the data without having to have the suit. I'm the performer, I'm the actor. I'm also being like a tech artist here, so he doesn't have to worry about it. He's going to be working on the Unreal side of things and just working with the creative side. So this is, really amazing workflow during these times where we cannot be on location. We can just work remotely. So make sure you check out our GitHub so you can get those assets, and that's what we're using for today's webinar. So let me show you essentially here. Let me share my screen so you guys can see that this is real time at the moment. Patrick, I'm just going to showcase what I'm using here at Access Studio so everyone sees that it's live. And let me share my Access Studio. So this is Access Studio here. You can see I'm doing a movement live. All I've done is essentially set up my data to stream through BVH on our BVH broadcasting settings here. I have our skeleton data with displacement. I'm sending this data through TCP because that's what our remote Perception Neuron remote stream requires. And I'm sending that through a command prompt. And you can see my data. Let me make sure you guys can see that before we move on to Patrick here. So you can see here that I'm sending the data to the server. Right now it's going through 60 frames per second. It's giving the size of each frame essentially. So this is real time. So now we can go ahead and I can shoot it over to Patrick where he's going to demo for us the Unreal Livelink. And Patrick, you can take it away.
All right, let me grab this screen here. All right, can everybody see this? I hope.
Yes.
Cool, awesome. But yeah, great intro there. and then really one of the best things about Livelink, that if anybody's familiar with Unreal, is that it actually works when you're not in play mode. And that's typically kind of one of the things that I think new users have a little bit of trouble like understanding, is that typically games are running. They would be running, and it would have a runtime process. But a lot of times in production, we never get to that point. We work almost entirely in the editor. So Livelink is a way to get information into Unreal that doesn't necessarily need to be in play mode. And that's one of the big benefits. So we'll see that here shortly. I just wanted to go over this one quick thing with as far as the plugins and where they need to go. If you have a project that you started, you would need to just put the plugins into the plugin folder. If there isn't a plugins folder, you can just create one. It doesn't matter. And then you just would put it in there. And that's the only thing I've really done to this project that was in any way custom. Other than that, it's just a vanilla build of, this is 423, I believe we're using today. So, I want to turn off my notifications. I do, it's in here. Let's see. All right, hopefully, shoot. All right, hopefully that's it. Okay, great. So, yuck. How do I actually put it in? Alarms on. There we go. All right, so that should work. So what we're going to actually show is just kind of how to basically set this up from the beginning. So you'll really only need a couple of basic things. When you first open up your project, you may actually not see any of these folders. If you don't have engine or plugin content in, it'll look like this. It'll look pretty blank. But if you need to access the stuff in the Perception Neuron folder, you need at least the plugin content folder on, so you can actually see those two folders. And inside there, they give you this nice robot that we're going to use initially, and then we're going to show you kind of how to retarget that to a character that I believe it came from iClone, right? Is that where that one's from? Okay, cool. So initially, you'll also probably not see this little window in the right-hand corner. So to get that window up, we literally just go to Window, Livelink, open it up, and this is where you'd actually set up your sources. So I already did it this morning with Daniel. But if you had multiple ones, like this one is actually my local machine. So I was actually running a copy of Access myself, and he's running the remote one. All you really need to do is go in, add a source, go to Neuron Live, type in the correct information. So locally, I could use this and just use it as a default. For his, I actually need to uncheck and put in the IP address that he gave me. And then it'll give you a green light if you have stuff. I can actually turn on mine locally as well, and you see when it's actually playing, I get a green light telling me I'm getting data. And if I pause, after a little bit, it'll stop because it realized it stopped. And that's the basics of getting it in. That part's the easy part. The next part is really just hooking up the skeleton to receive it. So when you get these, this content that's inside your Neuron Livelink, you're actually going to want this robot actor. So you literally just drag him out into the viewport. There's a couple of things that you will have to do in order to get this to work, because right now you'll notice there's no skeleton, there's nothing on it. So there's just a couple of little things that you need to do that I think they're eventually going to make it automatic, but this is what you need to do. So right now it's because there's no skeletal mesh attached to it. So inside my components here, there's just not one assigned. So I'm going to assign the robot. So now I have my mesh, which is great. And then you also have to determine what animation class it's going to use. So this is the robot anim BP, which matches with this one down here. So I'm going to attach that, which as soon as I do it, actually moves him over because that's where he actually is. And then the last thing you need to add is a Livelink component. So if you go to this add components, you can just type in the search box for Livelink, and they have Livelink skeletal animation. That will set it up so that it will receive the skeletal animation. And if I click auto activate, that's going to give me the activation. So now you can actually see he's moving around, and I'm actually receiving the stuff that Daniel's sending right now, which is really, really cool. So that's pretty much it to get things in. And the good news is if you're using the default skeleton, that's literally all you have to worry about. So depending on how you're constructing your project, I believe they said they use the naming convention of Maya's Human IK. So if you're building your characters with that, you can bring them in and the bone names will just match and everything should work. But that's not always the case. So let's dive in just a little bit into what these assets are that make this up, and hopefully that'll answer a little bit of kind of what is possible. So this blueprint is actually made up of several like smaller assets. And so we're actually using a few different things here. There's a skeleton, which is actually defining like the bones and what is actually being used to drive this. There's the mesh item itself, which is applied to the skeleton. This is something you would do in a DCC. You do your weighting and all of those things. All that still has to be done ahead of time, of course. There's a blueprint that is telling it what to do. And this time we're just taking Livelink pose and it's going directly into output pose. Here I could actually change if I wanted to change which set of data it's listening to. So if I was still sending on this one, I could actually just swap it over, and if I compile it, I'll get the recorded animation that I was using in here, or I can swap back and get the animation that Daniel's sending me. So it's literally just picking a source in this area here. And then the last part of this is if you have physics. So depending on what you're doing, you may want to have it so that hands can't go through walls, or they would actually bounce off each other and collide and stuff like that. I don't know if this was actually set up completely for this asset or not, but that's just an option. So these four things are really what make up any usual like mocap character. So when you're trying to do a retarget, I think sometimes the word retarget is maybe misused slightly. Retargeting usually implies that you have an animation that's already finished and you're trying to skin it onto another animation. And in this case, we're actually accepting live data, so it's not as much of a retarget as it is we just need to change the bone names. And so, because these are the bones that are actually being used for the robot that's coming in. But in the case that we wanted to use a custom character, like maybe this guy, which right now is he's receiving the data that's coming in from my local playback. His bone structure is completely different because iClone has their own naming convention and all those kinds of things. So we'll look at that real quick, kind of what the differences are and maybe how to work through this. So the main thing that you're going to want to be comparing is the skeleton bone names to what the character clone bone names are, right? And obviously, like, there's probably 10 different common ones. There's Mixamo skeleton, there's our internal and UE engine mannequin skeleton, there's the Maya human IK. So there's several of these out there. And so once you kind of build these for each set of bones, you hopefully wouldn't have to redo it as long as you keep these blueprints. So what we need to do is actually tell the incoming data, all right, instead of using this hip here, I actually want to use the word hips, right? And there's a lot of these bones. You don't have to do all of them. You really, it will just kind of inherit as it goes down the skeleton, but you need to do as many as you need to make it look correct. And it also depends on what is being sent. So Perception Neuron sends a certain number of bones and things. Something like Motion Builder might send more or less. It just depends on what you're using. But for the sake of this, we'll just talk about what the neuron is sending. So the way that we're actually going to approach this is to use a blueprint to do this. So inside the character, we've created a new blueprint called, and it was named Remap. So really what this is a special asset that Perception Neuron provides. So this may not be an option for every other mocap suit. I just want to make sure that's pretty clear. So when you go basically to get this, you create a new blueprint class, and you search for let's just search for neuron. So there's this Neuron Livelink Remap asset, and that's what this actually is. And so when you open this up, it will be completely blank. You won't have all this stuff here, but I'll show you basically what these are. So what we're going to do is do a get remapped bone name. So literally, if you've never used this graph before, when you right click on it, you can type in get remapped, and you need to take off context sensitive, since it is trying to help me. Oh shoot. Actually, there's a function down here for it. So, this is the function that we actually need, this get remap bone name, and then we're gonna this should actually be here when you create a new one, and then we actually just need to create this switch on int. So we can, switch on, it's not int, it's switch on name. So you just search for switch on name, you get one of these guys, and it's gonna be blank by default, but once you actually select it, you'll get this option over here where you can add elements to it, which will just add more pins, and then you can label them. And so what you're actually going to want to do is label all of these pins with the name that is coming from Perception Neuron, which in this case is this skeleton. So these names. And then on the other side, we're actually going to pass in this return node, we're going to pass in what it's supposed to be connected to, right? So we're going to connect neck to neck twist and spine to spine 2, and whatever the names of the things are that we need to remap, we're going to map them to the things that are coming from the neuron skeleton. So I did kind of the minimum requirement, and sometimes this may take a little bit of trial and error because, for example, especially in like the neck and the spine, some things have like neck twist bones and things that aren't being used. They may have extra spine parts that aren't being used, and so you may have to just kind of see like which ones are like the minimum for what you need, or which ones are having the most impact, and play with the names. But once you actually go through it and do it, it's not super complicated. It looks like a lot of nodes, and that's because there's a lot of bones. But really, once you do this once, every other character that you brought in from iClone that has this same bone structure is going to work with this same asset as long as you're doing the using Perception Neuron robot as like your base skeleton. So there's one other thing that you have to actually set in order to get this to work, which is kind of an important one. And I'm gonna actually, I think I disconnected that. And that's, we have to tell the asset to look for this remap node instead of just going straight through. So where that actually is inside the blueprint for that character. So in this case, this is what the character blueprint looks like. For our robot, it looked like this. You know, it's the same screen. But on this output pose, there are some settings for it that we are going to want to adjust to make this actually work correctly. Because right now, if we didn't use it, or sorry, on the Livelink pose, if we didn't actually change this, right, it would actually still be looking for the original Livelink asset that just kind of comes as default. So on your robot, if we look at it there, it's just set to the default Livelink remap asset that comes with their project. So they actually have one that was already built for their robot initially, which is kind of what enables that particular one to work. Since we're modifying that through this blueprint, we just need to make sure that we tell the skeleton, hey, use this, don't use the other one. And so essentially that's done once you click on this Livelink pose, this retarget asset, you would change it. It would probably be on this one to start with, and you would change it to this, right? File. And so now I'm getting that data from, this is my local, right? But that's only because I'm here. So now if I change this over to Daniel and compile it, now he should be controlling this character as well. Hey, cool. And what's super cool about this, like honestly to me, is that he's actually pretty far away. Like he's down in Miami, and it's working in real time from here to there based on their server, which is really cool. Because I mean, right now, trying to get a mocap stage, get a mocap actor, put all that together when everybody's on quarantine, it's definitely a bit of a task. And so being able to do this remotely and get somebody in a suit, so I'm not over here trying to do something with the suit and then come back over to the computer, is actually extremely handy. And since this data is coming in over Livelink, as we kind of mentioned earlier, it's live in the viewport, no matter, even though we're not in play mode. Because typically you'd need to be in play in order to get stuff to actually be happening, but with Livelink we don't. And so that's how you can use sequencer and take recorder and all these other things in order to be able to record this data and then play it back later. But yeah, this actually worked out fairly well. Like obviously with this character, he's got a pretty different structure. So like his arms overlap and some things like this. There definitely would be some things I would go and clean up. But the basics are there, and it's actually fairly painless.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, typically the performer would act as like the character itself, so they would try to avoid hitting the character stomach in that case, their performance, and that
Sure.
works great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and these are kinds of obviously within animation. This is why animators, exist, is because none of this stuff is 100% perfect, just right out of the gate. But this, I mean, honestly, getting this as like a root motion and for all of your stuff is going to be way less time consuming than if you were actually to go through and try and hand animate all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, are you wearing you've got the pro suit on, or which suit are you wearing?
I got the studio suit right now.
Okay.
That's why.
Yeah, because I did not hook up the fingers because there was way too many bones.
You can see in the back with the robot.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So the robot actually has all of them actually in, which is really, really cool, because I feel like most of the time, especially even if you're doing optical tracking, like they don't have all the fingers for sure. It might be like wrist, thumb, maybe index, something like that. But you always have to go back, wear gloves, do the stuff over again. But if you're wearing this suit, you can do the hands at the same time.
Yeah, and this is like the start of the basis of what we're going to be introducing in the near future with our hybrid tracker, and then introduce like object tracking. So you'll have, full body, and then either if you want to have some kind of prop in the scene, or even, map our hybrid tracker to a virtual camera, so you can have that producer, film like scenario. So that's something that this is building off and wanting to introduce to users so that they understand this is like, for character. And then we're going to build off from that and introduce object tracking for virtual production and stuff like that.
Yep.
So yeah, this is great. So yeah, thank you, Patrick, for that insightful, tutorial. This is quite handy.
I kind of hope you find it useful. And so, I mean, really, I would say if you're, brand new, just starting out with it, like the first thing I would do is I'd start with the robot, of course,
Yeah.
because that one's already mapped. It's really easy. You gotta, again, the only things you really need to do is once you drop it in the scene, make sure you update the skeletal mesh, update the anim class to match, and add this live link component and turn it to auto activate. And that's pretty much all you need to do. Once you get into the remapping part, it will become a little bit more complicated, and you will kind of be bouncing back and forth and and updating this remap thing. But again, once you do it once, it's really not that bad, and this can be taken and reused in other projects and reused with other characters. So definitely, once you go through the headache of this, don't get rid of it.
Awesome.
But this isn't a whole lot different. I mean, if you were to load this character up in Maya, you would essentially do the same thing. You would just be renaming every bone in the tree to match. And so this allows you to do that without having to touch the originals and possibly destroy some animation that maybe you're working on in your GCC. So.
Great. So I'm going to throw you we're just curious, throw you a little curveball here.
Sure.
As far as entering, getting the data into Livelink, now you should in theory be able to put this into a sequencer, correct? Like the recorded data.
Yep.
Which is, I guess, the a good and an awesome feature that Unreal has, so you can build your own scenes and record data directly into it.
Yeah, so I won't go into like a whole long detailed thing about it, but there's sequence recorder and take recorder, and they kind of do similar, they kind of have similar functions, but these are the two things that you would actually use depending on what you're doing in order to kind of record these things into a sequence. You can really do like a lot of things to kind of automate this process and make it work a little bit faster. I generally use the take recorder to do this kind of stuff. So to do this, there's only like a few things that you really, really have to do. Well, the main thing is like you have to have a source of some sort that it's trying to record. So this can actually just be something in the level. It can be directly from the Livelink source, or you can get it from the actor. It kind of depends on what you actually want to record. So a lot of times what we'll try and do is we'll actually get like the Livelink source, and we'll grab the actor in this case, so that we actually have like the recorded keyframes for the actor, but we also have in this one, we have the raw data. So that way if we need to go back and clean it or try and apply it to something else, that's kind of how that works. So there's defaults that are set up for this, so which you can actually adjust if you would like, in order to kind of have a naming convention that makes sense for what you're doing. But the defaults are just like the scene number and the take number. If you go into the little gear icon here, this is where these defaults are. And there's all kinds of settings to try and work through this. But so in a nutshell, you literally just hit the record button, and like if you start moving around and start doing stuff, you can see it's recording keyframes. I really, really hope this doesn't crash, because I've never tried it from over the internet yet. And so once it's done, it actually does like a little bit of a keyframe clean, and then it just queues up the next one, because it's kind of assuming that you would be going and just doing several of these in a row. So if you actually wanted to go back, you can actually do this review last recording. And if I go to that, it's actually going to bring up the last thing that I recorded, which has this data in here, which is cool. So it's actually driving two things in the scene, and the reason for that is we recorded the raw Livelink data, which is still feeding the other actor. So literally, I didn't necessarily need this robot actor in here, but it just kind of depends on what you're doing, whether you want to get this stuff or not.
Right.
But you may notice like that I just literally set no settings or anything like that. So we just got kind of lucky that the frame rate matched. It's very possible that it wouldn't, but the good news is inside of these, like there's actually way more information than you really ever would need, because Livelink data typically is coming in really fast. And so even though there's only a certain number of like keyframes and stuff that are in here, there's actually subframes as well that you actually just aren't even seeing. But these are all the keyframes that are happening, and to do all that in real time from another location is actually really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I have the output as 60 frames. Maybe that's what it is.
Cool.
I mean, that's just to work efficient.
No.
You know.
And that's why, if you notice here, so one thing I can see is that our we're slightly maybe not on the exact frame, but there's still one per, which is great. But yeah, but I have a feeling if yours is anything like most of them, you can record it like probably 200. You can send like 240 hertz.
Yeah, we can do
so
240. Yeah.
we can actually take all that data in as well.
Cool.
Wow.
That's why you were crossing your fingers like, oh, hopefully it doesn't crash.
Well, so a lot of this depends on what your sample rate is, and so you can actually set in the advanced options like how many like ticks like are you going to sample and things like this. There's also some command lines to adjust these, and so I wasn't sure what it was going to do like just on default. And there's also 423, so there's a little less options for monitoring. And in 425 you've actually got over here, you'll have a separate monitor. It's in developer tools, and it's called the time data manager or time data monitor. And in that, you can actually see like your Mocap data coming in. You can see any kind of Livelink data coming in, and then also see like genlog signals and videos and stuff like this, and time align things. So there was a lot of work that went into that. But yeah, I mean, so now I have this, and literally, if I just wanted to go back to Take Recorder and start a new record, I can either start one with this as a base. Or I can just set up a new one and kind of re-roll from there. It really just depends. So if I click this back arrow, it's going to take me to what we're going to do next, which is take 2. So then if I wanted to record, again, so if he moves around and stuff, we'll get like more keyframes. And actually is like kind of waiting to see if it sees something. And then if I hit stop, it's going to save all this out. I could keep this somewhere else, so it would probably make it easier. Go back, and now I can review that take. And you could just record these over and over again. And it's really fast. So awesome.
Thank you, Patrick, for that. I want to just emphasize as well that Unreal has a ton of learning online videos. So make sure you guys check out their website. If you have any questions regarding the sequencer, the take recorder, all that stuff, they have tons of videos out there. So
yeah, there's a lot of good information about that. And I think a big reason for that is because internally our teams use it. So when they're creating the Fortnite cinematics and things like that, they use these exact same tools. So yeah, so they get pretty well tested through that process. So.
And it's free for all.
yeah, and that's another really good thing for sure. So.
Great. So I think that sums up today's webinar, and I really appreciate everybody who came out to see this video. We will post this video on YouTube. If you have any questions for my team here in Miami regarding Perception Neuron, make sure you guys email us at contact@neuronmocap.com. And give me 1 second. I have a question here. The question is, can we do multiple performers at the same time? Yes, you can with the help of Livelink. Absolutely.
So why don't we just show that really quickly? So what we can actually do to show this would be, let's see here. So we can take in on the one character. I will just change what his source is. So instead of using Daniel, I'll use my internal and play this, and we're really gonna test and see how good my computer is here. All right,
Awesome.
so now I've got data coming in. So this is actually two different instances of Neuron, which you wouldn't necessarily need to do, but because you can get multiple characters into one instance of it, but in this case, that's just how we have it. And so if I go back to take recorder and just record another take, and I get, so now I have my animation and Daniel's coming in at the same time, and we can record that. And if I go and review, so now I have both the different animations happening at the same time. So pretty cool stuff to be able to get that. And that might be a good question for you guys. What's the limit of the number of characters that you can have in a single Axis session?
For each software, it depends. We're using for Axis Studio, we can use up to 5 characters at a single recording, and Axis Neuron, which is our first with the first hardware, up to 5 characters as well. Axis Neuron Pro, 1 character. So it's just a matter of how much the Unreal Livelink can support as far as the data coming in, because it's a lot of data. So it's all, as you can see, as you populate different characters, you see different names. So from my side, I put my character naming as Daniel, and then as soon as you connect it to the live link, I populated my name as an actor in there.
So one important thing to maybe also mention though, so I actually don't have the other characters' keyframes in here, right? I just kind of noticed that. The only reason I was still seeing it move was because I was still seeing live link data, and there's a very simple reason for that. I didn't add it as a source, and so when you're actually setting this up, I was just kind of in a rush, and I didn't actually add it as a source when we were first starting. But so what I would need to do is down here in my live link section here, I would actually need to add the other one, because I'm actually getting it on this one as well, right? And so if I don't have that in there, it's not actually going to record. So now let me play this back here. Okay, we're all good. We'll do a little test record here, and it takes a second, and then it kind of shows the frames. All right, there we go. So now if I turn this guy off and I go review that last take, now I should actually see it. So just a good point to note, if you don't have this, the sources in your recording, it's not recording. So good to know.
Awesome.
And live, and depending on what you're doing, you can have many sources coming in. You can have facial rigs. You can have they're going to have object tracking as well, and so you would just be able to add these in as well and record all those at the same time. So
great. Awesome. Thank you for, I know I put you on a spot there. It was amazing how you covered that.
I was really glad I knew the answer to that one. So I spent a little bit of time with that team, and I'm sure I probably did some of these things kind of quick and sloppy, so I apologize for that, but I really want to just make sure
it's a good introduction for everyone out there. Awesome. So, thank you. Cool. So I think that wraps it up. If you have any questions for Patrick, you guys can email us at our email contact@neuromocap.com as well, and we can relay the information to him if you have any questions regarding this. So that's it for today. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we'll catch up with everyone, our public, in the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cheers.